Today's topic is going to be on environmentalism. We're going to start on the idea with topics of global warming. In global warming, we're going to look at first and foremost some of these soothsayers, which are really trying to proclaim that the world is going to come to an end, or that we're going to enter into some type of global flooding. And frankly, this is untrue, because what they're proclaiming is the cause of this is something that has been around since before humans have been on Earth. They're blaming this on carbon, which is something that is actually increasing plant growth. And if you look at it, there is no actual cause to where there's actual concern, because even when we go down to actual true numbers of actual temperature growth, the actual growth is actually at a number that is close to zero, to even at best so low that it wouldn't even be measured in an actual number, because it would be close to about 1/50th of a degree and per year, and that 1/50th of a degree per year is so low that it wouldn't even matter over a long period of time. It would take basically 50 years to go up 1 degree average. That means in the time that most people live and die, you would have at best 1.5 degrees raise. And that's best case scenario. That is assuming that this trend continues evenly throughout time. That assumes that there's no type of shift in temperature. And that assumes that this is some type of uniform thing. Now, if we actually look at the actual way temperatures have gone and way the trends have been looking, we'll see that that basically every 20 years they proclaim that it can be global warming. In the past 20 years, the previous 20 years, it would be global cooling as the major concern. Now, if we look at that, we can see that this would not be as much as a steady change, but more that they're proclaiming that it's more of a dire warning and just trying to drum up the next big thing. And if you really kind of follow the money, you kind of always realize that they're always coming from these government sources or non-governmental agency sources, and these are always from the same thing, where these people from these governmental sources or non-governmental agencies or non-governmental organizations are always basically filled with lawyers, because lawyers, the way they come up with conclusions is and not in a non-scientific manner. They come up with their conclusion, and then they want to find evidence to support that conclusion. As opposed to science, they will actually want to have the evidence first and then come up with a conclusion later. And this is what is distorting all of these outcomes. So what we're getting essentially lawyers that are coming up with these ideas of what's going on, and then saying, scientists, if you want this money, you have to come up with this conclusion, which is getting such things as NOAA coming up with and screwing up with the data for the sole purpose of making sure that their department gets their money. And this is where we get vast bureaucratic errors done deliberately to ensure that their department continues for money. Because if they were offering the actual true data, their department would be at risk of elimination eventually, because people would be saying, well, if you're not offering us the right data, what is your actual purpose in existence? And there would be too many people calling for it. Then when we have the idea of what's actually causing it, No one else is looking outside this one little box. And the reason why is because they want to ensure that it is a organic compound. They do not want, obviously they can't do oxygen, and they cannot do hydrogen, because those form both water and the oxygen we breathe. So basically the only other option is carbon. And since people are not as familiar with carbon, they want to basically put blame on that. And this is where you find carbon being used as essentially the molecule that gets blamed. And when you find that, you're going to find that people are going to be unsure of what exactly it is, and you find a lot of people who are scientifically unsophisticated that are saying, "Oh, we need to lower carbon emissions." Well, if you look at really what carbon is with it, it's basically all it does when you burn it is when it hits plants use it as food. When plants consume CO2, they consume it as two groups of CO2, and they split, and all they do is basically every time they come in and they grab it, they essentially grab in carbon itself and basically form the carbon within their system, and they're spitting out multiple compounds of oxygen that comes back to us. And this is just the way it happens. It even happens when different organic materials decompose. And this is just the way the world has worked since the beginning of time. And this is not going to change. It doesn't matter if we're burning fossil fuels or not. And it doesn't matter where that carbon is coming from. Carbon is carbon. And I've seen a lot of people that don't understand the differences between that carbon is carbon. They think there's a difference between carbon from oil and carbon naturally from being exhaled from animals. They think they're totally different. They're not. They're the same exact thing. Now there are problems with other chemicals that end up getting into the atmosphere that we need to be concerned about. But when it comes down to actually carbon, which is what the actual concern of what these reports are based on, they claim that carbon is the issue. Well, if carbon is the issue, then frankly it's based on complete and utter nonsense. If carbon is the issue, once you get rid of carbon, you're going to kill off plants. And you kill off plants, you're going to kill off all life on Earth. All terrestrial life will die if you eliminate the production of carbon. Doesn't matter what carbon source we're talking about. And the majority of carbon is coming from the ocean anyhow, so that's an issue you're never going to be able to deal with, because the majority of life is coming from under the sea, and it's going to bubble up anyhow. And when you have dead life anyway, that dead life is going to give off carbon just automatically. That's something we can't control. Then the next part we need to look at is, since we know that these basic graphs have been all proven false, we need to look in another direction. What can we actually do to improve the environment? Because on one aspect, they want carbon. You have a lot of people calling for carbon taxes. Carbon taxes do nothing. All they do is they line the pockets of governments and people investing in these programs for carbon taxes. They do nothing to actually solve any issues. Even if you believe in these models, which have been proven false, they do nothing to solve any problems. The actual only solution to any problems of environmentalists is actually conservation of the environment. The way you do this is by actually looking at the resources from an actual commodity perspective. This only happens when you look at it from pure capitalism. You're only going to find this from that. If you look at throughout history, socialist and communist governments, you're always going to find the most destroyed environments in every case. You're never going to find any environments being taken care of. If you want the best environments, you go to the ones that have the closest to pure capitalism. This is just a fact. You can't get around it. You can't ignore the fact. You can't say, "Oh, but those weren't real communism, or those weren't real socialism." That because that happened with it, and oh, we know how to take care of it now. That's not a fact. The fact is because you have no commodity value on these things, they're never going to be taken care of because there is no value. Once there is no value, people don't want to take care of it. And when that happens, it ends up getting destroyed. So if you don't want your environment destroyed, you need it to be protected as a commodity. It needs to be treated with value. And this is why you have in these capitalist countries, you will have things such as fishing limits for certain fish to ensure that they don't get overfished and fish species die out. Now, if you go to communist and socialist countries, this doesn't exist because they don't have an idea of supply and demand. They don't believe in it. So what they'll do is they'll overfish something and it dies out. And now you're left with nothing. And they underpriced it, so there's nothing left, and people die because of this, and people go out of business because of this. This is what happens in these countries, and the whole environment gets trashed from these areas. You'll see basically barren beaches, barren fishing villages in every one of these cases. Now you can either A, have fishing villages and beaches that are beautiful areas that are taken care of because of conservation from actual treating things as commodities, or B, you can have destroyed barren beaches and fishing villages that are basically the cause of socialism and communism. There's no middle ground. And this is our two choices here. There's no option otherwise. It doesn't matter what people say. If they want to come up with their ideas of a Green New Deal, they'll say, "Oh, we want to propose a Green New Deal." We need to look at the first New Deal. The first New Deal was a massive failure. This ended up causing an extension on the Depression to begin with. So we want a Green New Deal? You mean something that was basically named after something that continued on the Depression? That's not exactly something positive to begin with. Now we want basically something from socialism that's basically attached to something green and supposedly good for the environment. That's not something good for the environment, because socialists and communists do not know how to take care of the environment. You look at every liberal city and every liberal county and every liberal state, and their environments suck. The actual environmental records of these cities and states and counties are horrible. They're always in the bottom of the barrel. You look at their water quality, bottom of the barrel. You look at just the way they take care of their beaches and everything, and the actual quality of the actual environment, and it's horrible. And this is what we're supposed to import to our whole nation, and it's supposed to be a Green New Deal? No, this is only going to lead to a catastrophic event. This is why any type of thing that should be even suggested here should be rejected. Now we have other things such as looking at realistic proposals. Is we need to go after looking at things as commodities. Don't look at things as, oh, these things should be free for everyone. You need to look at things as these are actual things of value. When you look at things of value, then you actually view things as an actual commodity, and people are willing to take care of them. This is why when you get public housing, public housing always gets destroyed. And what happens every few years is that public housing has to be torn down and then rebuilt back up, and a few years later, destroyed again, built back up, replaced, and repeat. When we go with actual real owned housing, you'll have homes that are basically as old as well over 100 years old, and they're still going good, and they're being taken care of. And these are where you have homes that are actually privately owned. The reason why is because there's actually a vested interest in keeping this home up and going because they own the actual home. They're not it's not a publicly owned property that someone doesn't even care about. And that's why you have a big difference. There's a vested interest in keeping this property going. And you need to consider the same thing with the environment. When there's a vested interest in keeping it clean and keeping it up and going, there's always going to be a better quality. When you basically say, oh, we're going to make this public, and we're basically going to take all private ownership away and start making this big giant bureaucracy around it, it always turns into a massive disaster. This is why the so-called right-wing states always are cleaner than left-wing states. It always happens in the United States, and it always happens abroad, where you have your more conservative countries are always going to be cleaner than your liberal countries. And we don't need any more evidence than this. I mean, if you look at some of the dirtiest countries, they're always the ones that go, oh, socialism is the answer. If you want to look at these countries, just look at the way these countries change. Whenever a country switches from a capitalist system to a socialist system, it becomes the worst environmental state out there. It'll just automatically disappear into environmental hell. We're basically, everything's being dumped everywhere because there is no reason to actually have environmental standards, because there is no private ownership of property anymore. And if we want an actual solution, we need private ownership of all property. This is where we get this idea where people are going to actually take care of things. Basically, if you own something, you're going to take care of it. If you don't own it, you're not going to care. It's as simple as that. There is no more simple idea than that. And when it comes down to it, is we can't go with these brain-dead ideas of Green New Deals, or ideas of unproven science that has more to do with dogma than anything else. We need actually proven ideas that work. And this means treating actual land, treating actual environmental areas as commodities. This is the only thing that has been proven to work throughout the history of humanity. Now, if you like this, like it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and click the bell, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Bye.